Welcome to Daily Armour. Our scripture today will be found in the book of Genesis, chapter number 8, and looking at verse number 1. Genesis 8:1, and it says, "And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged." So here we've got God remembered Noah. Now remember, the building of the ark, that was God's plan. God was frustrated with the way people were living, the way people were doing, that they had evil thoughts just abounding. Noah preached to them year after year, day after day, and he tried to let them know that the Lord is going to send a flood. He's going to judge the people, and he's going to send a flood, and the fear never came upon them. They never took it serious. They never felt any concern. But God had a plan, not just for the people, because they had a choice to make. They could believe Noah, or they could choose to not believe him. But he also had a plan for Noah, and the reason that he had him build the ark. And there was so much room for so many people. But if anything else, God still had a plan for Noah and his family. And when God told Noah to get on the boat, it wasn't Noah's idea. God said, it's time. He told him to get on the boat, and God shut the door. So here Noah is shut in. All this is going on around them. They would have felt the boat lift up. They probably would have been tossed to and fro many, many times with all of the rain that was coming down and everything that was happening. And if you look at it from Noah's perspective, how is he ever to know when it was going to get better? When were things going to change? And that's what I want you to notice in this verse number 1. From Noah's perspective, nothing had changed. Nothing was getting better. Nothing was moving forward. But it says, and God remembered Noah. God remembered Noah. That God always had a plan, but this is when the next part of the plan was going to start. And I love how when it is explained in the whole chapter that you see God putting into place things that Noah is still not aware of. From his perspective, when we look at this in chapter number 8, this is when the waters are starting to lower. In Noah's perspective, he couldn't see that. He couldn't tell that. It wouldn't have been, from his perspective, nothing had changed. Nothing was different. But God remembered Noah, and things had begun. And like I said, God had a plan the whole time. It's just Noah would not have been aware of when the change took place, of when the next part of the plan. But here is the next part of the plan, and it's still going to be a while before Noah sees the effects of it. It's still going to be a while before Noah it visually gets to see the difference. Oh, it is better. It's already began here in chapter number 8, but Noah is not aware of it. And so I don't know what you're going through. I know the things in my life that I'm going through. Sometimes it doesn't look like anything is changing. Doesn't look like anything is moving forward or anything's getting better. But I know God remembered Noah. God remembers me. He's not forgot about me. He's not forgot about you. And when he says that it's time for the next part of the plan, then it could have already begun for you, and it could have already begun for me, and maybe we just don't see the effects of it just yet. Maybe from our perspective, what we see, because all we can go by is what we see, but what we know, we have to believe by faith, those things that we cannot see. And my Wednesday night class for the youth, I am going through the chapter on faith. That is Hebrews chapter 11. And we are going through all of these. We were studying. We just did Noah. And here the Lord is on a whole nother note. It was a whole nother set of notes that I run across. Here I'm on Noah with us. But we just taught on Noah on Wednesday night, and how that Noah, about his faith. So he believed what God told him, even though he couldn't see. And in this instance, he's out there rocking to and fro and bouncing around and all around on this big, humongous boat. Just huge boat. And he's not aware of what's going on the outside. He doesn't see the water go down. If you think about it, if Noah could have looked outside, he would have had nothing to compare it to. Whenever you cross a bridge, you're going over and you go over water, you can see the water line. Usually if the water's down, if things are dry, you're going to see a water line. You're going to see a stain on the ground or on some rocks. You're going to see a little bit of a stain, and you're going to see that the waters are down. If the waters are up, you're going to see there's no water line. You can't see where it is, so it's fresh. It's making fresh new water line. So for Noah's perspective, think about him. If he could have even have looked out in the midst of all that, he didn't get to see the waters as they went down. There was nothing. Everything was covered. So he had nothing to base his perspective on. So it would have done him no good to have seen outside, because there was nothing but water. And when there's nothing but water and you're looking out, it looks everything's covered. You're not going to be able to tell when the whole section goes down, until we see here on into chapter number 8 that, so now here's some little mountains are going to start to pop up. Then you're going to, from your perspective and my perspective, we're going to say, hey, something is going on. But it started a long time ago. It started a long time ago. God he always had a plan. He always, had everything under control. It's just what we see from our perspective can mess us up. What we see is sometimes the enemy will use to get us depressed, to trick us, to get us off track, and we will want to give up when we are in the midst of the victory, and we just don't even realize it because we can't see it. From our perspective, that we are, we're not seeing the whole picture. We're not God. God sees the whole picture. And let's look on down here into chapter number 8. And it says, look in verse number 2, it says, and the fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. The next part of the plan had already begun. It just didn't change anything for a while for Noah. Noah was still on that boat. Still wasn't time to get off that boat. It was still, he was having to ride it out. Things were still, in the containment of that boat, and not looking like it was moving forward, but it was already moving forward. God was in control, and God was putting into place the next part of the plan. And here we've got in verse number 3, it says, and the waters returned from off the earth continually. So here the Lord is working. He started something, and it started back up in verse number 1. It says, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. God sent a wind. He already put into place. That's him putting into place the plan. Noah was as good as getting off that boat. It was just waiting it out. It was going to take time. Just like the flood and the day after day after day after day of the rain, and the waters are just continuing to swell until it covered everything. The waters are going to need to slowly go down. If they went down too quickly, that would be full of destruction. But as they're going down, and things are shifting and things are moving and getting put into place, and as we know, the earth was moving and shifting, and things were happening underneath Noah. But he was safe on top of it. He was safe up here. But as things were receding, things were being put into place exactly where they needed to be put, because God had executed his plan. And in my life and in your life, God has probably already executed the next part of the plan that maybe we're not aware of it yet. Maybe we haven't seen the results of it yet, because some things need to happen slowly, and so they can get right in the correct position of where God wants things to be. Let's continue on. So in verse number 4, it says, let me go back up to verse number 3. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, and after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. Verse number 4, and the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat. Now, when I noticed this, and it stopped on the mountain of Ararat, I would have been like, woo, let's get off the boat. Let's go see what's going on. I'm like all forward. I'm like, let's go. I'm ready to go. And so many times I'm so ready to go. And then I see God's hand is like, not yet. So Noah is now feeling things are different. So he's no longer just floating around, but the ark has rested. He stopped. Something is taking place. He is aware that something is taking place. Now he's aware of some things. He hadn't seen them yet, but he's aware. He can feel they're different. That floating around is no longer happening. He is stationary. The ark is rested. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountain of Ararat. And the waters decreased, verse number 5, and the waters decreased continually. So things are still happening. The waters are still going down. Things are still taking place. He's resting. Now he's stopped, but it's still not time to get off the boat. Now it's stopped, and it almost, if for some of us, it almost would feel like, okay, things have stopped, and then nothing else is happening. Lord, I'm ready to move. I'm ready to move forward, but the ark has rested. It stopped, and it feels like nothing is happening. It feels like almost like we're going backwards. Now we're stuck. Now we feel like, oh, things are bad. Things are getting worse. When the whole time things were continuing to get better. Because look at what it says. And the waters decreased continually in verse number 5 until the 10th month. So we have here in the 7th month in verse number 4. Now it's the 10th month. This is month after month. 7th to the 10th. 7, 8, 9, 10. So you've got several more months that it feels like you're stuck. But things were happening still. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. And the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. So not just that the ark rested on Ararat. It caught a hold of something on the mountain. Now the waters are so receding that there are several things out there. There's several mountaintops that are seen. But is it time to get off the boat? No, it's still not time to get off the boat. Then we have that in verse number 6, and it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. So now he's getting to look out and see some perspective. Now he can see some mountaintops. Now in his perspective, he can see, oh, things are getting better. And he sent forth a raven in verse number 7, and it didn't come back. And then he sent forth the dove in verse number 8 to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest in verse number 9 and came back. And so then he took, and it says he waited 7 more days. Let me find where it says that. In verse number 10, and he stayed yet other 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove. So he waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again. And then on verse number 11, the dove came to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked. Here we've got some life. Not only had the waters abated, but you had to have enough time for the trees to grow and for things to take place. We know that it doesn't happen overnight. This was day after day. These were things that were taking place. And it says in verse number 12, and he stayed yet other 7 days and sent forth the dove, which returned not again. So this was a good sign. The dove found rest in the trees and could feed herself. And it says, in the 2nd month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, was the earth dried. And in verse number 15, God spake unto Noah, saying, in verse number 16, go forth of the ark. It was time. But the plan had already began. And just because I can't see it and you can't see it doesn't mean that things are not happening. Things are going on that in our perspective, we can't see. And even sometimes it feels like we get stuck and if things have stopped. Things were still, the waters were continually drying up. Things were continually happening. Think about that. Remember that God remembered Noah. He remembers you. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.